Gopi Janavalabha Girivaradari Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Janavalabha Girivaradari Gopi Janavalabha Girivaradari Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya So we'll be hearing from Srimad Bhagavatam, chapter 1, text 18, and text number 49. So we'll do call and response word by word. Iti putra krita aghena saha anutaptaha mahamunihi swayam viprakritaha ragya na eva agham tat achintayat iti putra kritaghena Son Uptapto Mahamunihi Swayam Viprakrito Ragya Naivagham Tad Achintayat Iti Putra Kritaghena Sonupta To Mahamunihi Swayam Viprakrito Ragya Naivagham Tad Achintayat Iti Putra Kritaghena Sonutapto Mahamunihi Swayam Viprakrito Ragya Naivagham Tad Achintayat Iti Putra Kritaghena Sonutapto Mahamunihi Swayam Viprakrito Ragya Naivagham Tadachintayat
Iti Putra Kritaghena Sonutapto Mahamunihi Swayam Viprakrito Ragya Naivagham Tadachintayat
Iti Putra Kritaghena Sonutapto Mahamuni Swayam Viprakrito Ragya Naivagham Tadachintayat
Iti Putra Kritaghena Sonutapto Mahamunihi Swayam Viprakrito Ragya Naivagham Tad Achintayat
Iti Putra Kritaghena Sonutapto Mahamunihi Swayam Viprakrito Ragya Naivagham Tadachintayat
Iti Putra Kritaghena
Sonutapto Mahamunihi
Swayam Viprakrito Ragya Naivagham Tadachintayat
Iti Putra Kritaghena Sonutapto Mahamuni Swayam Viprakrito Ragya Naivagham Tadachintayat
Iti Putra Kritaghena Sonutapto Mahamunihi Swayam Viprakrito Ragya Naivagham Tadachintayat
Iti putra kritagena
Iti putra kritagena
sonutapto mahamunihi
sonutapto mahamunihi
swayam viprakrito ragya
swayam viprakrito ragya
naivagam tada chintayat
naivagam tata chintayat
Iti putra kritagena
Iti putra kritagena
sonupto mahamunihi
sonutapto mahamunihi
Swayam viprakrito ragnya
swayam viprakrito ragya
Naivagam tada chintayat
naivagam tata chintayat. Is everyone here? Okay. And on the Zoom, would anybody like to chant? Okay. Iti, thus, putra, son, krita, done by, aghena, by the sin, saha, he, the Muni, anutaptaha, regretting, mahamunihi, the sage, swayam, personally, viprakritaha, being so insulted, ragya, by the king, na, not, eva, certainly, agham, the sin, tat, that, achintayat, thought of it. Translation. The sage thus regretted the sin committed by his own son. He did not take the insult paid by the king very seriously. Purport. The whole incident is now cleared up. Maharaj Parikshit's garlanding the sage with a dead snake was not at all a very serious offense. But Shringi's cursing the king was a serious offense. The serious offense was committed by a foolish child only. Therefore, he deserved to be pardoned by the Supreme Lord, although it was not possible to get free from the sinful reaction. Maharaj Parikshit also did not mind the curse offered to him by a foolish Brahmana. On the contrary, he took full advantage of the awkward situation. By the great will of the Lord, Maharaj Parikshit achieved the highest perfection of life through the grace of Srila Shukadeva Goswami. Actually, it was the desire of the Lord and Maharaj Parikshit. Rishi Shamika and his son Shringi were all instrumental in fulfilling the desire of the Lord. So none of them were put into difficulty because everything was done in relation with the Supreme Person. Can I read this next text too? Okay. Text 50. Prayasha sadhavo loke parardvandveshu yojitaha na vyatanti na rishyanti yata atma gunashrayaha. Translation. Generally, the transcendentalists, even though engaged by others in the dualities of the material world, are not distressed, nor do they take pleasure in worldly things, for they are transcendentally engaged. Purport. The transcendentalists are the empiric philosophers, the mystics, and the devotees of the Lord. Empiric philosophers aim at the perfection of merging into the being of the Absolute. Mystics aim at perceiving the all-pervading Supersoul. And the devotees of the Lord are engaged in the transcendental loving service of the personality of Godhead. Since Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagavan are different phases of the same transcendence, all these transcendentalists are beyond the three modes of material nature. Material distresses and happiness are products of the three modes, and therefore the causes of such material distress and happiness have nothing to do with the transcendentalists. The king was a devotee, and the rishi was a mystic. Therefore, both of them were unattached to the accidental incident created by the supreme will. The playful child was an instrument in fulfilling the Lord's will. Thus end the Bhaktivedanta purports of the first canto, 18th chapter of the Srimad Bhagavatam, entitled Maharaj Parikshit Cursed by a Brahmana Boy. So, we're coming to the end of this chapter. Parikshit, cursed by a Brahmana boy. So Maharaj Parikshit was glorified earlier in the Srimad Bhagavatam, as well as this chapter, for being very great, wonderful ruler, king, and above all, a transcendentalist of the highest order, or in other words, a devotee of Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So Maharaj Parikshit went to the home of a sage. He was feeling pangs of thirst and hunger, fatigue, and the sage didn't give him respect that at that moment Maharaj Parikshit thought that he deserved. Maharaj Parikshit used his bow to place a snake, which was dead, on the sage's neck, as like a garland. And Shamika Rishi, that sage, his son Shringi, heard of this, and because he was the son of a sage and had been trained a little bit in the Brahminical culture, he had some potency, he had some Shakti, and he playfully cursed Maharaj Parikshit, which is a great devotee of the Lord and wonderful ruler of the whole planet, to die in 7 days, just for more or less an incidental, offense. And we see here that actually the sage was regretting the sin committed by his own son. And again, we're hearing Prabhupada explain that actually these happenings, Maharaj Parikshit, being such of a high quality, did this activity by the will of the Lord, and the son of Shamika Rishi cursed Maharaj Parikshit unnecessarily, severely, also by the will of the Lord. And Prabhupada mentions in this last purport that, more or less these two persons, that Shamika Rishi and Maharaj Parikshit, are both transcendentalists, and therefore they're not affected by the material distresses and happinesses which actually are products of the three modes of material nature, which are sattva-gun, rajagun, and tamo-gun. These are goodness, passion, and ignorance. So the supreme, or the absolute truth, the absolute, that non-dualistic substance is realized in three features that's discussed in the beginning of the Srimad Bhagavatam. That there's Brahman realization, there's Paramatma realization, and then there's Bhagavan realization, which means that we understand that the Supreme, the Absolute, is realized as impersonal effulgence, or that oneness, that totality of spiritual energy. Then the localized Paramatma residing within the heart of every living entity, living being, and also within every atom. And then ultimately at the Bhagavan realization, which is that the Supreme, the highest of the high, the Absolute, is actually a person and is the source of the localized Supersoul, as well as the Brahman effulgence, or the spiritual energy. So these were some brief comments. Maharaj, would you like to share something with us? So, any other devotees? Dr. Fred.
I have a small question pertaining to Krishna's willing to put Maharaj Parikshit in this position where he just like seems to be in the pangs of thirst, and he does this. How do we not get like, or how do I not like think that if I'm like in a mood that Krishna put me in that mood and like be righteous in that? How do I like know that I'm wrong all the, like when I'm in my weird moods, you know? Like how do I become humble? More humble, I guess. Because like you said, Maharaj Parikshit didn't do this because of like the modes of nature, like how I get into my moods and I'm moded out or whatever. But Maharaj Parikshit did it under the Krishna's will, so, you know. Sorry, the question's not that well defined. I'm sorry.
So that's a nice mood that we can we have the humble position. We understand that actually I'm still conditioned by the modes of nature. I haven't yet really become liberated from the reactions of my previous karma and activities. I'm not free from the pullings of this material energy that I'm actually encased in at the current moment and surrounded by. The devotee has transcendental knowledge. The devotee knows I am actually a spirit soul who's actually an eternal servant of Krishna. It's my real identity. But at the current moment, I'm completely ensconced with matter. I'm completely shadowed or overshadowed with this material energy. And of course, there's the famous verse in the 10th canto of 14th chapter, where Lord Brahma is actually describing the position of the pure devotees, or the devotees who actually recognize, whatever sufferings or that I'm actually experiencing in this material world, that's due to my own karma. And that I will just go on offering my respectful obeisances, my mind, my body, and from the core of my being, my heart, to the Lord, knowing that if I do so and I continue to serve Him, then one day He will bring me back to His abode, and that place, that supreme abode, where I will be free from the modes of nature. And in my real position, that place will become my rightful claim, just as a son who waits patiently becomes the heir to his father's property. So we should take that humble position, as you mentioned, that we are still conditioned, but for other devotees, or rather for the devotees, especially the exalted devotees like Maharaj Parikshit and all the characters of the Bhagavatam, more or less, even Shringi, we have to understand that these persons are not ordinary. They are very exalted souls, and Krishna is enacting his transcendental play just to attract our minds and set the stage for our deliverance. And so, those are some points. Bhakti Damodar Prabhu.
If the Brahman effulgence is spiritual, then that means that it's Satchidananda, right? Or is it just Sat?
Well, the Brahman effulgence is one experience is when being merged into that Brahman effulgence. One experiences the Sat potency or the eternality. That is the soul is constitutionally Satchit Ananda. but more or less the Ananda, or as far as I understand, the Chit are both not very much experienced by the living entity in that condition. So, but it's described that actually this Brahman effulgence is like we are ourselves part of this Brahman effulgence, or we are emanating from the body of the Lord, all the living entities. So that's my understanding. It's not so thoroughly explained. Raj, do you have any corrections or reclarifications?
Yeah, Sat portion is there, not the Ananda. That is for when one is engaged in active service to the Lord and a relationship. Then one gets that bliss. Because they deserve it. That's how Krishna, he responds to the different living entities. It's like the materialists, they want to enjoy the property of Krishna, material energy. So he gives them that. As they surrender to me, I reward them accordingly. They don't want to know anything more than that. So he gives them what they want. They try to get some pleasure from this material energy, and it's very scarce. Then they want to get free, they want to get some relief from the cycle of birth and death, but they don't want to recognize the personality of Godhead. They just want to be impersonal, or they want to, like the Buddhists, they want to cease existing, want to commit spiritual suicide. Then the Lord has a process for them to do it like spiritual suicide, where they don't actually commit suicide because the soul is eternal, but they put themselves in that impersonal state. And Krishna allows that so they can get what they want. He's very, very kind, giving everyone what they want. And those who want serve him directly, and he gives them that. But they get more than the impersonalists, in the sense that they get that transcendental bliss. Just like a very famous, powerful man, some people want to relate with him from a distance. They offer their respects, or they read books about him or magazines about him. And others want to get closer. And then there are those who are very close to him, his personal family members, or others who may not be in the family, but who are so pleasing to him and so dear to him that he takes them into his inner sanctum, and they get to understand things that nobody else understands about the person. Everything's revealed to them. Whereas those who are not so qualified, they don't get everything.
So I was actually just reading the Nectar Devotion with Martin, and that was nice. And in the first chapter, Rupa Goswami and subsequently Srila Prabhupada explains that there are some aspects to pure devotional service which are unique, and that he mentions that mostly these mystics or these absolute, or these persons who are trying to merge with the absolute, or persons who are trying to attain yogic powers, they have some personal motivations. Even to become zero or to commit spiritual suicide, more or less, is also a personal motivation, born out of frustration. And so this Bhagavatam is a very unique text, which systematically and scientifically actually shows that the pleasure which is attainable through pure devotional service is unlimitedly greater than the pleasure of merging with the Supreme or becoming zero or attaining even all sorts of mystic perfections. And this is important because more or less in our conditioned state, we can't but to start the process of spiritual life with personal motivations, because we're conditioned to think that we are this body, I am this person, meaning I am this body, and as I get pleasure for this body, then that is my welfare. That is my actual welfare. And so what's interesting is that when we get knowledge, knowledge is gained by personal experience. As Maharaj mentioned, we try to enjoy this material world, but the pleasure is scarce, right? So actually, Queen Kunti describes that Krishna, the Lord, is the property of the materially exhausted, the persons who are basically done with material life. Why? Because they've gotten some knowledge by trying to enjoy again and again in countless number of births. Even in this life, every time we try to enjoy materially, we'll get some burn. We'll get a little sting back coming our way. Or the pleasure is fleeting. It comes and it goes. So what kind of pleasure is that? Pleasure that comes and goes? So that's knowledge. So when we get that knowledge, then what happens? Then we consider that our welfare is actually our real self. Our welfare is actually changed. So now we're thinking, let me actually become one with God. I'll actually become free from all the material entanglements. I'll become liberated. I'll search for liberation. Now that's my goal. So knowledge informs our goal, and then our goal is attained through different processes, which are actually given in the ancient text. And we also speculate. We may also have our own process that we just concoct in order to achieve some goal, which also isn't very sound. But as we get more knowledge, especially from these bhakti texts like Srimad Bhagavatam and Bhagavad Gita, as well as Chaitanya Charitamrita, which has the pastimes of Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who exhibited the topmost transcendental mellows in service to Krishna on the Bhagavan platform of realization. These texts show that you're trying to get pleasure from this merging with the Supreme, but actually that pleasure is pretty much nothing compared to the pleasure that you experience in service in your real constitutional position, eternally serving Krishna, anandam buddhivardhanam, increasing ecstasy in service to Krishna. And so Rupa Goswami states that actually, if you take the pleasure which is derived by identifying oneself as Brahman or spirit or the Supreme, many people, they say, we're all one. You're me, I'm you. It's all Brahman, it's all spirit. There's some pleasure from that. But that pleasure multiplied 1 trillion-fold is still not comparable to 1 atomic fraction of pleasure attained from loving service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So now you say, well, why should I believe you? Well, so then that's the thing, is that if we go on speculating and think that we know, then we won't be able to enter into this knowledge. But as soon as we hear from proper authorities, then that vibration actually can help change the heart. And that's what's so important about hearing from the bona fide devotees of the Lord who are practicing devotional service, is when we hear that transcendental vibration coming from their lips, then our heart is changed and we actually move towards devotional service.
It's said that Krishna gives liberation quite easily. But he's very selective about giving someone devotional service, because by devotional service he's purchased. And the example is the gopis. Lord Krishna felt that their service was so exalted, so selfless, so pure, that he was bankrupt. There was no way he could repay it. Nothing he could give them that they didn't already have by having that. They would have to be satisfied. He asked them, please be satisfied with your own good qualities. So that's the idea, that devotional service is very rare. He gives impersonal liberation quite easily. But devotional service, it's so attractive to him. He becomes so thankful that he loses his independence, so to speak, and he becomes purchased. We get some idea then how different that is from just those who are just thinking more or less selfishly, not so much thinking about other living entities or about Krishna, or even about themselves properly, compared to those who are pure devotees, who care about all living entities. The devotee of Lord Chaitanya who prayed, let me take the sinful reactions for all the living entities in the universe so they can all go back to Godhead. He was prepared to stay and suffer for them. That's a unique, only a pure devotee would be able to think like that.
Yeah, there was one example that I also heard, that Shukadev Goswami, he praises Maharaj Parikshit, that even though Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, that person, Krishna, he actually becomes the charioteer and takes the orders, or becomes the order carrier of the Pandavas, or he was praising Yudhishthira Maharaj, So, yes, Bhakti Fred.
Hare Krishna. Thank you for the nice class. This is really helping me. So I have a question, Maharaj. We seem to have this selfish propensity, and all our propensities are perverted propensities of Krishna, but he doesn't seem to be selfish in the slightest. So where is this, is it just because we're conditioned by the material modes of nature that we desire to be selfish? And then it also seems that we're not good at being selfish because we want bad things for ourselves. So it's like, we're really in such a contradictory situation, especially since I don't see any logicality or practicality to impersonalism, or what real impersonalism is. Like, if you want to, like a rock going into a rock, that doesn't even, if that's impersonalism, that's odd. Or if you just want to be alone, if that's impersonalism, that's not even there's no way to just be alone, because there's just no way to be alone. So I don't actually understand the conceptualization.
Krishna he shows some selfishness. Always think of me, become my devotee. Worship me, offer your homage to me. Seems like quite selfish. He wants everything offered to him. He wants to be the owner of everything. He wants to be beneficiary of all activities, all austerities. Think of him always. Can't get more selfish than that. So we try to imitate, and we tell our potential partners, just think of me, love me, serve me. But it's a big failure because we can't deliver.
Jai. Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. Thank you everybody for being here. Hare Krishna.